Most people think Twin Lakes, Wisconsin is just a quiet lake town. And honestly, that's part of the charm. But it has some music history, movie connections, stay tuned for that, and way more personality than you'd expect. If you don't already know me, my name is Maureen Boyle. I'm a real estate broker licensed in Illinois, Wisconsin. And I've been serving the Northeast Illinois and the Southeast Wisconsin real estate markets since 2007. Today we're diving into Twin Lakes, Wisconsin so deep that you might feel like you've gone back in time. Twin Lakes is a village of approximately 6,400 full-time residents and about a third more part-timers. If you're thinking about maybe moving to Twin Lakes, Wisconsin or visiting anytime soon, you're going to want to know where it's at. And I mean, a lot of people just use the GPS, but I'd like to let people know exactly where Twin Lakes is located. So Twin Lakes is located in southeast Wisconsin in the southwest corner of Kenosha County. It sits at the Illinois-Wisconsin state line just north of Richmond, Illinois. Twin Lakes is about midway between Chicago and Milwaukee, a little closer to Milwaukee than Chicago. It's close to an hour from Milwaukee and a little bit more than an hour from Chicago. It's fairly conveniently located to both O'Hare Airport outside Chicago and Mitchell Airport in South Milwaukee. It's about 12 minutes southeast of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and about 40 minutes west of Lake Michigan. So let's talk about the lakes, because the lakes are really what makes Twin Lakes what it is. So a little history here. The lakes are named after the first set of twins that were born in the area to early settlers. So the northern lake is Mary and the southern lake is Elizabeth. Both lakes are spring-fed and really clean. They are connected by a small channel that runs under a bridge, and they're not really navigable, but you might be able to go from one lake to the other if the water level is low, but not too low, and you're maybe on a canoe, a raft, a kayak, or something like that, and you might need to lay down too, depending on things. I would go check it out before I planned on going under there, but there's no way you'd be able to go under there like in a pontoon or a sailboat. So keep that in mind. The lakes are full sport lakes, meaning that you could boat, fish, swim, ski, jet ski, tube, paddleboard, kayak, canoe, and sail. In the winter, you could ice fish, you could ice skate, and I believe that snowmobiling is allowed, but you really just want to make sure that the lakes are fully frozen. You might be wondering what Twin Lakes is like. So there's not one traffic signal or stop light in the village. There's a couple of stop signs, obviously, you'd need those. There's a charming little downtown area with some shops, a couple of taverns, bars or pubs, whatever you want to call them, some restaurants, and a couple banks and other things like that. There's a public beach on Lance Park, and I could talk more about that a little bit later. But it's just a charming little walkable downtown area. There's a lot of events that happen there every year. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what else there is to do. So things to do in and around Twin Lakes would be, obviously, you have the lakes and the whole beach thing that I already talked about earlier. But it's easy to spend a whole day at the lakefront. There's golf. Twin Lakes has a country club that's open to the public. It's got a great restaurant there, and they do a great fish fry every Friday. Hiking, orchards, scenic drives, those are always really nice. Farmers markets, spring and winter walks. There's a number of restaurants in Twin Lakes, and some of them have outside dining that's on the water, so that's always nice when the weather is appropriate. And there's the whole lake life thing, which is fun. There's seasonal events. Some of the events are the car show, Liberty Fest, which is the 4th of July festival that starts with a parade, and then there's like 2 days of festival going on at Lance Park. There's a Corn Fest. Yes, it's a whole festival for corn. Corn is delicious. There's also a Harvest Fest, music in the park, Trees on Parade, which is the Christmas tree decorating contest, and a craft fair. And I believe there's voting on the trees to, in different categories, but I think they also are still selling the trees or offering them for sale with all the decorations and everything on them. There's also a tree lighting ceremony in the square. Sometimes there's a winter parade. Not every year, but some years. It just depends on what, is planned for that year. There's also business in the park. And then the big event would be Country Thunder. So if you're not familiar with Country Thunder, it is a huge country music festival that happens every year in July. It lasts about 4 days. There's camping on the ground, so if you want to stay the whole 4 days or just a couple of days and you don't want to go to a hotel, this is probably a cheaper and at least more available, because I think the hotels fill up pretty quickly. But they do have some pretty big names that have been there over the years, and you could go to the Country Thunder USA website and you can check all of that out. It does get pretty crowded, like the traffic gets pretty crowded at during that time. If you live in Twin Lakes and you are within, now this kind of changes over time, but if you live within like a half a mile of the event venue, you can get nicely discounted tickets to attend Country Thunder. And I think that's just for putting up with the noise and the traffic and everything. It's not something that I would bring little kids to. They are allowed there, or at least they have been, but I don't think the atmosphere there is really little kid friendly. So I've been there a couple of times, brought my adult children, and that was fine. I would say for anyone maybe 16, 17 or older, it would be good. There's just a lot of stuff that you might not want your younger kids to see there. So anyway, that does get crowded. Like the traffic gets pretty heavy, and but it does bring a lot of business into Twin Lakes. So there's a lot of people that go into the restaurants and the stores and the gas stations and everything during Country Thunder. So normally Twin Lakes is pretty quiet. Like there's never any traffic. You don't have to wait more than like one car to go ahead of you at a stop sign. Most of the time the gas stations aren't so busy you can't find a pump, things like that. But when an event comes to town like Country Thunder, then you're going to have to you should expect to wait longer, have longer lines, more traffic. Sometimes, depending on how they have the traffic flow that year, because it seems to change every year, you could get stuck in some traffic for a while. So don't expect to get anywhere as quickly as normal. But you might be surprised. Sometimes it's not so bad, sometimes it's really bad, but there's also back roads you can take to get to where you're going. So GPS would be really handy in this situation. I also want to talk about some free events or some free things to do in Twin Lakes, and one of them would be the Aquanaut water ski show. So the Aquanauts are a water ski team, and they practice on Lake Mary every Wednesday and Saturday evenings during the summer. You could probably look up their website as well and find more information on that. It is free. There's a ton of parking, so you don't have to worry about it getting too crowded for that. There's also bleachers for the seating, and sometimes they have like food trucks or some kind of refreshments there. So it's really cool. It's very entertaining, and it's free. So, and it's in beautiful Twin Lakes. Some of the other things would be like hiking. You could go to orchards. There's area orchards where you could go and pick apples, buy pumpkins and things like that. They have different festivals around different areas too, not just in Twin Lakes. Scenic drives are really nice too. Pretty much any season, but fall is really spectacular. And I want to talk a little bit more about like fall drives in a minute. There's farmers markets, and there's a nice small business Saturday. So it's the day after Black Friday, and it's a huge event. Sometimes it's in downtown Twin Lakes, sometimes it's just outside of Twin Lakes, and there's a lot of vendors there, small businesses, food, You can get beautiful wreaths there. You can find gifts for people on your gift list. And it's cold. It can be really cold for that. The last time I went, which was just this past November, I wore my snow boots, my snow pants, my heavy down winter coat, gloves, a scarf, and I might have even had a hat on, and I don't normally wear hats, but it was that cold. But it's fun. There's music playing, and there's usually some bonfires and some fresh food, home-baked goods and things like that. So that's always fun. It's more of that small town charm. So what kind of places, towns are nearby? So Twin Lakes isn't that big. It doesn't have a ton of everything. Like, it doesn't have every single thing that people need. It doesn't have a hospital. It has a doctor's office. I think one doctor's office. There's a couple doctors in that doctor's office. It has a post office, a hardware store, a couple of fast food restaurants, not many, banks, things like that. But there's no transit. I've never seen a bus drive through there, like a Greyhound bus or anything like that. You'd have to drive to Fox Lake to get onto a train, maybe going into Chicago. That's probably the closest location for like the Amtrak. I think it's Amtrak. Anyway, to get you down to Chicago. Obviously, you could call an Uber or a Lyft, but you don't see a lot of taxis. I don't think I've ever seen a taxi there, and a lot of people might not even know what a taxi is anymore, but so there's not a lot of that, so be prepared for that. If you live close to town, things are walkable. If you don't live close to town, you'd probably need some other kind of transportation to get to where you want to go. So what's around Lake Geneva? So Lake Geneva is a ton of restaurants, lots of shopping, places to have a couple of drinks, wineries, ice cream stores, tons of gift shops. It's got the lake. There's boat tours that are on Lake Geneva. There's a beach. You got to pay for that though, unless you get there at a certain hour of the day when they're not charging anymore. There's a short path that goes around the entire lake, which is about 21 miles. I've not walked all 20 miles, but I have done like 7. It's a lot of walking. Most of it is fairly flat, but there are some spots that are kind of difficult. So I don't know if you'd want to bring like a baby stroller or anything like that. It could be difficult. I don't like bikes. I don't think are even allowed. So, but it's beautiful because you get to walk between the mansions around Lake Geneva and the lake. So it's just really pretty, and you're literally walking through the backyards of the mansions. So it's cool. There's also Kenosha if you want to go to Lake Michigan, lakefront, Kenosha would be the place to go. There's a lot to do in Kenosha, and it's only about 45 minutes from Twin Lakes. Richmond, Illinois is just a couple minutes over the Illinois-Wisconsin state line. And there's restaurants, there's a lot of old architecture. There's shopping there as well, a nice coffee house, and a couple of really good restaurants. People tend to come kind of a long distance to enjoy the food there. So I'm not saying that there's not good restaurants in Twin Lakes. There are. There's just more options outside of Twin Lakes, additional options, I would say, outside of Twin Lakes. So that's something to be aware of. And Richmond is also a charming little town and has even a babbling brook like running through it. So it's like you couldn't really get better than that. Antioch, Illinois is about 20 minutes southeast of Twin Lakes, and that's similar to Richmond, only it's bigger. It's much bigger. It has 2 theaters, actually. One a movie theater, and the other one is a theater where you can go and watch plays. There's a lot of restaurants on Main Street, a lot of shops, thrift shops, things like that, and also some nice architecture and some history there too. So if you're finding that when you're in Twin Lakes that it might get a little boring or it might be too quiet for you, it's really easy to just venture out. And if the surrounding areas are still kind of boring for you and you want more excitement, you could drive about an hour, a little more than an hour to Chicago, and a little less than an hour to Milwaukee if you want more culture and like really nice museums and zoos and things like that. There's also the Chain of Lakes area, which is, it's a chain of lakes. All the lakes and rivers are connected. I believe it's just a river with some fat parts of the river in there, which are the lakes. So the lakes are connected by channels, by the river, by, you know, whatever. And you could get in a boat and go from one lake to the next, to the next, to the next. I don't know exactly how many lakes are in the chain of lakes. Let me look it up. Okay, this is interesting. I just looked up the chain of lakes because I wanted to give you the correct information. So the chain of lakes in northeastern Illinois consists of 15 interconnected lakes and the Fox River, making it the busiest inland recreational waterway per acre in the United States. Isn't that interesting? I did not know that. The system covers 7,100 acres of water and 488 miles of shoreland, primarily located in Lake and McHenry counties. So the major lakes would be Grass Lake, Lake Marie, Nippersink Lake, Bluff Lake, Lake Bluff, Bluff Lake. Lake Bluff is a city. Fox Lake, Pistaki Lake, Channel Lake, Petite Lake, and Lake Catherine. So interesting information. I mean, I've been there a number of times, but I never actually looked at to see how many actual lakes are connected. So that's that. There's also camping at the Chain Lake State Park, which is also just over the state line into Illinois, just south of Wilmot, Wisconsin. So if you have found this video helpful so far, keep watching. Don't dip out. Next, we're going to be talking about how Twin Lakes made its way into a song by John Prine. We're going to be talking about the history of the music scene in Twin Lakes from the 30s to the 70s, and then some movie connections, some real movies were filmed in and around Twin Lakes, Wisconsin. So stay tuned for that. But if you have found this video interesting or helpful in any way so far, I would love it if you would like and subscribe, because this helps me to build my channel and have it go further and be suggested to other viewers. Okay, so let's talk about the fun stuff now. These are a lot of things that most people who live in Twin Lakes don't even know about unless they've lived there for a very long time. So one of the main things about Twin Lakes is the history of the music scene. So in the early 1930s, and this is probably way before a lot of people's time, but it's still part of the history, so I want to talk about it. So in, I think it was 1921, there was a ballroom. The Twin Lakes Ballroom was built in Twin Lakes. The building is still there, and it's right in the center of town. And at the time it was called the Twin Lakes Ballroom, and they hosted some big bands, Glenn Miller, Andrews Sisters, the Dorsey Brothers, and Lawrence Welk. So this is before, it might be before any of them were really well known or famous. But Lawrence Welk, for the 1931 summer, so for the summer of 1931, Lawrence Welk was the headliner for many of these big bands. And it was throughout the whole summer. Him and his wife actually lived on the property for that summer. And it was probably about 20 years later that Lawrence Welk got his own TV show. So that's fun that all those big bands were there. Then later in the 60s and 70s, by that time it was called the Wonder Bar, and they hosted a lot of rock bands. They hosted a lot of bands from the 60s and 70s. So not only the Wonder Bar, but then also kind of around the lake, there was a venue called the Edgewater Inn. And they also hosted some pretty famous bands. And they did get a lot of concert goers from the Chicago area. And a lot of the bands were Chicago bands too. But the reason for this, for why such a Chicago turnout, I would say, is because back then, the drinking age in Wisconsin was only 18, whereas in Illinois, it was 19. So that was kind of the thing back in the day. I did it myself. When I turned 18, I crossed over into Wisconsin so I could better celebrate my birthday. A year later, a couple of years later, it was the drinking age was changed to 21 for the whole country. So, but it was a cool thing, especially if you only had to drive a half an hour to get to where you wanted to go. Some of the artists that played at both places, or between the two. So some of the artists that played in Twin Lakes, and I think Edgewater probably had more rock bands than Wonder Bar, but I don't know. If you lived or visited the area in that time and you were able to see some famous bands, put them in the comments because I'd love to hear. I'm still researching a lot of this. So if you'd like to give me some information that I could research, that would be great. I would love it. So some of the artists that played in Twin Lakes back in the 60s and 70s were REO Speedwagon, Cheap Trick, Ted Nugent, Muddy Waters, and Styx. I'm sure there's more, so if you're aware of more, please put them in the comments below. The Wonder Bar is still there. It's just not called the Wonder Bar anymore. It's now called Rumpholz, and it is an event venue. So speaking of Twin Lakes making its way into a song, John Prine, who unfortunately we lost due to COVID in 2020, he wrote a song called Lake Marie. Why he called it Lake Marie, I don't know, because I believe he was talking about Lake Mary, or he was just traveling through at one point and decided to make up a song. I don't know. There's a Lake Marie in Antioch, Illinois, so maybe it was a little confusing. Maybe he just wanted to change it for whatever reason, but it's a different type of song. And it talks a little bit about the history of Twin Lakes, but it's also not correct. But it's still a cool song, especially if you live in Twin Lakes, if you've been to Twin Lakes, if you're familiar with Twin Lakes. It's a good song to listen to. Some people mistakenly call Lake Mary Lake Marie, but maybe because of the song, I don't know. But anyway, you could Google it, YouTube it. Let's talk about Twin Lakes getting on the big screen. So I find it interesting when there's a place that I know of and I've been to and lived in that makes its way into a movie. Like even when on Home Alone, the first Home Alone, John Candy talks about when they're in like the box truck getting Kevin's mother home. They talk about Kenosha Kickers and they mention Twin Lakes. So that's always exciting. The first time I noticed that, I was just like, oh my gosh, Twin Lakes. So it's just something fun and interesting. But so some of the movies that Twin Lakes, that have been filmed in and around Twin Lakes. In 1978, Damien, Omen 2, was filmed in and around Twin Lakes. In the 1997 film Fever Lake, I'd never heard about it until I moved to Twin Lakes, so I don't know if it was ever in theaters. But anyway, it's called Fever Lake, and it starred Mario Lopez and Corey Haim, and that one was fun to watch. I don't normally watch like horror films, and it seems like a lot of horror films are made by a lake or a pond or something, so maybe that's why a lot of these are like horror films. But I did watch Fever Lake because it's not that scary. But it was really fun to see places like Manny's Snack Shack, which is still there. There were a lot of shots there for the movie. And just like Main Street and everything, I think it's just fun because this was filmed, it came out in 97, so it was probably filmed in 96. And there's a lot of the town still looks the same, which is great. Like, I love that. Anyway, so that was fun. I think if you wanted to watch that, I didn't watch Damien Omen 2 because I don't watch that kind of like demonic stuff. But Fever Lake is pretty safe, I think, if kids are like 13 to 15 or whatever. In 2018, a movie called 30 Miles from Nowhere was filmed there, and I'm not sure exactly what that's about. you could check it. I'd never heard of that before either until I started researching. In 2019, there was a movie called Imago. I might possibly be mispronouncing that, but that was filmed in Twin Lakes, some shots down Main Street and a lot of it in a house in Twin Lakes. But that story is about human trafficking. So I haven't watched it yet, but I plan on it. I don't know how bad it is. I mean, human trafficking is bad, obviously, but I don't know if there's if it's scary in the normal scary way. And then in 2024, Night of the Skinwalkers was filmed there. I've not heard of that either, but it's relatively new because it was 2024. I have a feeling it's also like a scary movie, so I might not watch that, but it's interesting. It's really interesting when you see people, or when you see movies and you're familiar with the place, you live in that city. So that's always fun. This wasn't filmed in Twin Lakes, but in Silver Lake, way back, well, in I would say the late 90s, early 2000s, the remake of Amityville Horror parts of it were filmed there, like the house. They had a house that was on the lake that they made look like the Amityville house. And it actually stayed like that for a number of years. And now I think they knocked it down or something, or they sold off part of the property and put two really, really nice houses there. But anyway, I drove by there when they were filming one night and I didn't even know anything about it. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I did watch the movie. It's kind of scary, but it's not horrible. Anyway, so then I also want to talk about something kind of connected to the whole movie scene and everything, but some of the actors who were there actually in person. So I don't know if this is a rumor or not. Maybe it is because I don't have proof of it. I've had a number of people who lived there at the time tell me it was true. So back in the 70s, it's been said that Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and John and Jim Belushi used to come to Twin Lakes and hang out there in the summer. And they'd boat and ski and things like that and just hang out and have fun. So I don't know for sure if that happened, but I really think it did, because, I mean, unless the people who told me that are liars, I'm going to believe them. But I also had a situation or an instance where I was asked to interview for a listing of a house really near the water. And I was a new agent, didn't get the listing, but there was an elderly gentleman who'd lived there for years. And he was telling me when I went to interview, that that Bill Murray owned a house not far down the road. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I don't know if he meant he had lived there, owned the place at some point in the past and didn't anymore, or if he currently, at that time, which was probably like 2008, had the house there. So I thought, well, I have a lot of tools as a realtor and I understand how to use public records and things like that. So I went home and decided I was going to look it up. So I looked through tax records and things like that, and some real estate, like MLS and stuff, and I found that there was not one shred of evidence that Bill Murray ever owned a house on Twin Lakes. But I do know that a lot of times people, especially if they're like celebrities, they don't buy a house in their own name. They'll put it in like an LLC or a trust or something like that. And so I would guess that if he did ever own a property there, it probably was not, recorded in his name. But I do want to say too that there was a time, so I was driving through Lake Geneva coming from Delavan. I was driving east through Lake Geneva going to my house in Twin Lakes, and I swear I saw Bill Murray. I swear I saw him driving a red convertible, like a big land yacht. And the license plate, I was like, hey, that guy looks like Bill Murray. He had a hat on. And I don't know if he might have had sunglasses, but I don't know. And he had the top down on his convertible, but his license plate said Caddyshack. And it probably wasn't all written out, but abbreviated for Caddyshack. And I was like, there's a very good chance that this guy is Bill Murray. So I kind of followed him a little bit, but I didn't want to be a creeper. So when I got to my turn, I turned. But I thought, well, you know, Twin Lakes, Bill Murray, right there in Lake Geneva, could be. So I don't know. I don't have proof of it. A friend of mine who is a realtor told me in the past that she had rented a house to Bill Murray's mother. So I don't know. It's fun to think about. Maybe Bill will see this video at some point and maybe clarify. I don't know. But it's, you know, now it's kind of like a running joke with me and my kids about Bill Murray. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So if you're thinking about taking a trip to Twin Lakes, now you know some history. You can go past Rumpel's. Edgewater Inn is not there anymore. It's the Edgewater condos that are there now. Not sure where Bill Murray lived, if he did live there, so can't tell you an address to go check it out and, you know, take pictures or anything like that. If you're planning on moving to Twin Lakes, visiting Twin Lakes, or anything else, you have questions about Twin Lakes, feel free to contact me. All of my contact information is in the description. And so I would love it, again, if you would like and subscribe, as it helps my channel grow. And if you want more information about Twin Lakes, check out the pros and cons of Twin Lakes video that I did earlier.